In the frozen isolation of Nordvik, where silence cuts deeper than the cold, a fisherman named Lars discovers a woman's body sealed beneath the ice. A stranger no one recognizes. Her name is Elise Norland, a private investigator chasing a deadly secret tied to the missing postman, Oskar Lund. As Detective Henrik Voss leads the search, the truth begins to twist. Elise's death is no accident, and Henrik himself may be the hunter turned hunted. When the storm closes in, every secret, every lie, and every name buried in the snow threatens to rise again in murder in the far north. The town of Nordvik sat on the edge of the Arctic wilderness, where winter ruled all year long and silence was as thick as the snow itself. It was a place few people ever visited, and even fewer stayed. The locals were used to the biting cold, the long nights, and the feeling that the world beyond the mountains had forgotten them. The air smelled of pine and smoke, and the sound of wind howling across the frozen river was a constant companion. Nothing much ever happened there, until that morning when the ice gave up its secret. Lars, a fisherman who had lived his whole life by the river, was the first to notice something strange. He had gone out before dawn, as he always did, dragging his sled toward the riverbank with his tools and nets. The light was weak, the kind of gray that barely separated night from morning. As he walked along the frozen surface, his boot slipped on something slick and dark. When he bent down to look closer, his breath caught in his throat. A streak of red stretched across the snow, bright and frozen like a wound in the ice. He thought it was an injured animal at first, maybe a fox that had been caught by wolves. But as he followed the marks, he saw where the ice had cracked. Something pale showed through the fracture, a shape that didn't belong. Lars ran back to town, his heart pounding in the frozen air. Within an hour, 2 police officers and half the town had gathered around the site. When they pulled the body out, the air seemed to stop moving. The woman looked almost peaceful, her face untouched by decay, her eyelashes still white with frost. The cold had kept her perfectly preserved, as if time itself had been frozen along with her. Her clothes were too fine for the north. Soft wool, lined leather boots, a coat that looked like it came from somewhere far away. No one recognized her. The police cordoned off the area, but news spread quickly through Nordvik. People whispered in the store, in the post office, even in the small church by the hill. A stranger found dead under the ice was something the town had never seen before. Some said she was a lost traveler. Others thought she might be someone running from something. But no one could explain how she had ended up under the thick ice of the river, miles from the nearest road. That night, the temperature dropped even lower. The aurora painted the sky in green waves, and the town of Nordvik went quiet. Windows glowed faintly behind drawn curtains, and every door was locked before sunset. In a place where nothing ever changed, the frozen woman had brought an invisible storm. People tried to sleep, but the image of her face stayed with them. Calm, almost knowing, as if she had been waiting to be found. And for the first time in years, the cold felt like more than weather. It felt like warning. The police kept the woman's body in the small morgue behind the town clinic, where the generator hummed softly and frost crept along the window edges. The few officers Nordvik had were not trained for something like this. Most of their work involved drunk disputes, broken snowmobiles, or missing hunting dogs. A murder, or even a mysterious death, was unheard of. The townspeople waited for answers, but none came quickly. The woman's fingerprints were sent to the city, yet the database returned nothing. There was no match, no record, no missing person who fit her description. It was as if she had never existed. Her clothes gave the first clue. The wool coat was handmade, stitched with care, but the label inside was from a boutique in Oslo, hundreds of miles away. She had a silver pendant around her neck with a single engraved letter, E. No other belongings were found near the site, not even footprints. The storm had wiped away everything. Days passed, and speculation grew louder. In the cafe by the pier, people whispered theories over cups of steaming coffee. Some believed she was a tourist who had lost her way. Others said she might have been running from someone dangerous. There were darker rumors, too, that she wasn't dead when she went under the ice, that someone had used the river as a grave. In a place where everyone knew each other, the idea of a killer among them was almost impossible to accept. But the feeling of unease settled over Nordvik like a new layer of snow. Then came the results from the autopsy. The woman had been dead for nearly 3 months. Her body showed no signs of animal attack or drowning. Instead, there was a small fracture at the back of her skull, hidden beneath her hair. The blow had been clean and deliberate. Whoever had done it knew what they were doing. Yet there was something even stranger. The freezing around her body didn't match the time of death. It meant she hadn't died in the spot where she was found. Someone had moved her recently and placed her beneath the ice. The realization sent a ripple of fear through the investigators. The murderer wasn't just skilled. They were close enough to know the land and the weather perfectly. As the investigation continued, a new discovery deepened the mystery. 2 days after the autopsy, the town's postman failed to return from his delivery route. His name was Oskar Lund, a quiet man who had lived in Nordvik for 20 years. He was dependable, never missed a day, never caused trouble. His snowmobile tracks led out of town toward the forest trail and then disappeared. The police searched the route for hours, but there was no sign of him. The mailbag lay half buried in snow, its letters scattered like pale leaves. Fear turned into something colder that night. A sense that someone was watching, waiting. People began to speak less and look over their shoulders more often. The stranger under the ice had brought a mystery, but the missing man proved it was far from over. The search for Oskar Lund stretched into its 3rd day. The blizzard had slowed everything, covering tracks and burying clues under fresh layers of snow. The rescue teams combed the frozen forest, calling his name into the white silence, but no answer came back. What they found instead was his snowmobile, tipped to one side near the edge of an old logging road that had not been used in years. The engine was cold, the seat dusted with frost. Inside the cargo compartment, a small black notebook sat neatly wrapped in plastic, protected as if it were something valuable. When investigators opened it, they found pages filled with numbers and coordinates, carefully written in blue ink. Each set of coordinates marked a location somewhere in the forest. At first it looked meaningless, but when one of the officers plotted them on a map, a clear pattern emerged. A straight line that led from the riverbank, where the body was found, all the way to the old weather station far to the north. The station had been abandoned since the 1980s, after a fire destroyed part of the structure. No one went there anymore, not even hunters. It was miles away from the main road, reachable only by snowmobile. The decision was made to investigate. That night, as the wind howled and snow blew sideways across the fields, a small team of officers rode out, following the marked route. The trees grew denser the farther they went, bending under the weight of ice, their branches whispering in the storm. Every sound echoed in the emptiness, and more than once the men thought they heard something moving behind them, only to see nothing but the snow swirling in their headlights. When they reached the weather station, the building looked like a skeleton. Half of the roof had caved in, and rusted antennas pointed into the gray sky like broken fingers. The door was frozen shut, but they forced it open with a metal bar. Inside, the air was thick and stale. The room smelled faintly of fuel and old wood. Their flashlights swept across empty shelves, piles of debris, and what looked like sleeping bags laid out on the floor. Someone had been living there recently. In the corner stood a small camping stove, a few cans of food, and a lantern that still held a trace of oil. But it was the far wall that caught their attention. Pinned to it with nails were several old photographs, some faded, some torn. The same woman appeared in all of them, the one found under the ice. In each picture, she stood next to a different man, smiling faintly, as if unaware of the camera's purpose. One of those men was unmistakably Oskar Lund, the missing postman. The realization chilled them more than the cold outside. These weren't random photos. They were pieces of a secret life. Whoever lived here had been watching, collecting, and perhaps waiting. As they packed the evidence to return to town, the wind outside grew louder, and one of the officers noticed something in the snow just beyond the window. A single fresh footprint leading into the woods, already half covered by falling flakes. It meant only one thing. Someone had been there, watching them, even as they stood inside. The discovery at the weather station changed everything. The investigation, once seen as a simple mystery, began to stretch into something larger, something darker. The photographs found pinned to the wall revealed a truth the townspeople had never imagined. The dead woman had not been a lost traveler or a victim of chance. She was connected to Nordvik in ways no one had guessed. Her name, uncovered through forensic records sent from the city, was Elise Norland, a private investigator hired by an unknown client. Her mission had led her to the frozen town for reasons that were now becoming disturbingly clear. Elise had been investigating an illegal gold smuggling route that crossed the northern border. For years, whispers had circulated about people using the frozen rivers to move contraband, gold dust and nuggets mined from forbidden zones in the mountains. It was dangerous work, done quietly and protected by those who profited from it. Elise had followed a trail of false names and hidden shipments until it brought her to Nordvik. The notebook found in Oskar Lund's snowmobile belonged to her. The coordinates matched the secret delivery points she had uncovered. Oskar wasn't just a mail carrier, he had been helping her, passing letters and evidence out of the town without raising suspicion. The theory fit the pieces too perfectly. Elise had discovered something she wasn't meant to find. The blow to her head proved it. Someone had learned what she knew and stopped her before she could expose them. But who? The answer came quietly from an unlikely place. When investigators re-examined the photos, they noticed that in several of them a uniform appeared in the background. Faint, blurred, but recognizable. It was the blue coat worn by the Nordvik police. One picture even showed a man whose face, though shadowed, bore a familiar outline. The town's police chief, Henrik Voss. Henrik was known as a steady, respected man who had served Nordvik for decades. He had helped pull Elise's body from the ice himself, offering comfort to the frightened townspeople. But as evidence piled up, his name surfaced too often to ignore. Records from the capital revealed that he had been stationed near the border 10 years earlier, right when the gold smuggling began. His personal accounts showed sudden, unexplained deposits during the winter months. When confronted with the findings, Henrik appeared calm, even cooperative. He denied everything, claiming Elise's death was part of a misunderstanding, a tragic accident. Yet more proof surfaced the next morning. Inside Henrik's office drawer, hidden beneath a stack of old reports, was a sealed envelope containing a photograph of Elise standing beside Oskar, both smiling beside a snow-covered vehicle. On the back was written, "She knows." That was enough for a warrant. The police from the capital were notified, and a team was dispatched to arrest him. But when they arrived at his cabin, he was gone. The door hung open, snow drifting across the floor. The fire had gone out hours before. On the table, a single note lay under a half-burned candle. The words were written in careful, even handwriting. "You'll never find me before the thaw." The blizzard arrived the same night the police chief vanished. It came without warning, a roaring wall of wind and snow that swallowed the town in white. Roads disappeared. Power lines froze. For 3 long days, Nordvik was completely cut off from the rest of the world. The only sounds were the groaning of rooftops under heavy ice and the endless howling storm. The people stayed inside, their windows sealed, their lamps flickering. Fear had settled deep into their bones. Some whispered that Henrik Voss had escaped into the wilderness, that he knew the land well enough to vanish forever. Others believed the storm itself had come to claim him. When the weather finally broke, the town was silent again, buried under new drifts of snow. The search teams went out at dawn, their engines echoing across the empty white fields. They followed the trails leading out of Henrik's cabin, but the storm had wiped everything clean. For miles there was nothing, no footprints, no broken branches, no signs of life. It was as if he had simply walked into the storm and become part of it. 2 days later, a snowplow driver clearing the road toward the forest made a discovery that stopped him cold. Just beyond a ridge, half buried beneath the snow, was a black vehicle. The engine was frozen solid, the windshield cracked by ice. When the police opened the door, the body inside was stiff with frost, one hand still gripping the steering wheel, the other holding a pistol. It was Henrik Voss. In the passenger seat lay a file folder sealed in plastic. with Elise Norland's name written on the front. Inside the folder were her notes, maps, lists of names and photographs that revealed the full scale of the smuggling network. There were records of shipments, payment receipts, and coded letters linking people from Nordvik to business owners and officials in the capital. Henrik had not been working alone. He was part of something much larger, something that reached beyond the frozen town. Whether he had been fleeing from those partners or trying to expose them before they silenced him remained unclear. The gun in his hand suggested he never made it that far. The official report called it suicide. The case was closed quietly. Elise's body was sent south, and her story was buried beneath the same silence that had covered Nordvik for decades. The gold smuggling routes were erased from record, and the town went back to its old rhythm, slow, cold, and watchful. But people still talked. As spring approached and the ice began to crack, strange things happened along the river. Fishermen claimed to hear snowmobiles late at night, engines growling faintly through the mist before vanishing into the trees. Sometimes, under the melting ice, they swore they saw flashes of metal, tools, boxes, maybe even more bodies. No one dared to check. In Nordvik, silence had become its own protection. The storm had passed, but the feeling it left behind never did. The far north had kept its secret once again, wrapping the truth in snow, waiting for another thaw to uncover what still lingered beneath. In the quiet town of Nordvik, where the snow hides more than footprints, every secret eventually melts into the light. The story of Lars, Elise, Oskar, and Henrik reminds us that even in the brightest day, darkness can wait beneath the surface. Murder in the far north is not just a tale of crime. It's a chilling reminder that truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds a way back. If you enjoyed this mystery, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to uncover more dark stories from the world's coldest corners. Stay curious, stay alert. The next mystery might be closer than you think.